Welcome to Digital India Summit. We are speaking about a very special subject today. We'll talk about how technology will shape the human lives going into the future. I have two very special eminent guests with us to discuss this topic. We have Mr. Ramesh Raman, Senior Vice President, Business Development for the Adani Group, and I have Keshav Murgesh, Global CEO of WNS. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasure welcoming both of you on Digital India Summit. This is the 7th edition, and as we come out of the worst phase of pandemic, there are many learnings that we have, and obviously Digital India Summit has played a very crucial role in enabling the new normal for all the Indians. So Ramesh, my first question is for you. As a corporate citizen, obviously there are some major takeaways for you or some major learnings for you from this whole pandemic-induced transformation, or if I may use the word, digital transformation that we have seen across the globe. But what we have also realized is the fact that this transformation cannot go on forever or sustain forever if we don't have a solid infrastructure in place. So first of all, what is your macro outlook? And when I use the term infrastructure, what I mean is, the energy consumption requirement, the data centers, and everything.
It's actually a confluence of a few different trends, mega trends that are coming, right? So the first one is around the digitization that's occurring, all these new technologies that are driving a lot of change in the way we live, with the way we work, whether it is IoT, machine learning, electric vehicles, we talk about blockchain, and so on and so forth. The second part of it is not related to technology, but maybe something even more important, which is climate change. And so we have to change the way we live, we drive energy, we drive our cars, etc., etc. And in between sits the need for an entirely different kind of infrastructure, which needs to be built out across the world, and particularly in India, which is around data centers and 5G networks, the IoT network, and so on. So we see all this coming together at the same point, which is a pretty exciting time and a huge opportunity for India and for the rest of the world.
Right. But Ramesh, what you mentioned is a very important thing, that, we have to change the way we sort of live in this new digital ecosystem. So Keshav, this question is for you. Keeping that in mind, that, we are probably in one of the most, I would say, transformational era as far as digitization is concerned. What is the new order that is emerging in this whole technology-driven world that now we are in?
Yes, Mihir. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's really inspiring to see the kind of work you guys have done all through this crisis in terms of ensuring that people were kept up to date, and people are also constantly understanding the changes in technology, the digital landscape, and the way companies have performed and competed in this marketplace very, very well. So, if you just, look at this new order that you talk about, we are seeing a rapid change in technology. And often, I wonder that the lines of distinction between science fiction and reality are now getting blurred, if you ask me, right? You take the example of Facebook. Now, I don't know whether to call it Facebook or Meta, right? But I think we should go with the new name. Now, this company is investing millions of dollars in what they call the metaverse, and signaling really this company's increased focus on augmented and virtual reality technology, right? So we're seeing this big change, all these big announcements, market cap going up, market cap going down. But it's not just Meta, actually. Google's recent acquisition of a Canadian company, North, also shows its intent to actually get more serious and a more modern approach to augmented reality and software, and get even more involved, I would say, in this so-called metaverse world. And we are also hearing now that Apple is supposed to be developing a headset essentially to enter the metaverse digital world. So short point here is that metaverse is now planting itself firmly on the globe's business radar. It is nascent today, but it is going to pick up momentum. And when it does, you can expect that era is going to be an explosive era for all of us. Now, what is really exciting? The question was around new technologies. The really exciting aspect of decentralized technologies and tools is that it actually brings together and creates an interlinked and much more expansive digital universe.
So, what Ramesh just answered and Keshav, what you just described, when we combine all of that, then probably what we are looking at is what is going to change our lives is obviously, technologies like IoT, blockchain, metaverse, all this. Now, when all of this comes together, Ramesh, then what are we looking at? Because, maybe you simplified your answer by saying that, we need to change the way we live. It's already changing. But when all of this comes together, couple of years down the line, we are in 7th edition of DIS, probably the 17th edition of DIS or 27th edition of DIS, 10, 20 years from now. What are we looking at? How all of this will come together?
That's a great point, Mihir. And you're right. I did simplify my answer. And the ways this can change, right, will the only thing we can be sure of is that we've probably overestimated it for the short term and massively underestimated the impact in the longer term. That said, let me just walk you through some examples of how the three forces or trends that I mentioned earlier, how they need to interact in order for any of them to really succeed. So if you look at blockchain, if you look at data centers, electric vehicles, even AR, VR, and other new trends, they're going to be very energy intensive. Just as an example, right? Data centers are supposed to take up 10+% of the global energy demand over the next 10 to 15 years. Electric vehicles, depending on who you ask, is going to add more than that to the energy requirements. Now, all of this can't happen with traditional energy, where we are already trying to drive down fossil fuels in the grid, and we're building up renewable power to support it. So all this additional incremental energy requirement will need to come from renewable energy. Now you take an electric vehicle that's getting charged at night. We know that's not coming from solar, right? So we've got to figure out how all this network of applications and the infrastructure that's needed, whether it's energy, whether it's network connection, etc., works. And here's the really interesting part. A lot of the digital technologies that are being developed today that Keshav talked about, which I completely agree with, those are part of the challenge that we have to deal with because they increase our energy footprint. At the same time, they're part of the solution because we can't solve the problem, the opportunity to increase our renewable power to where we want it to be without using IoT, without using blockchain, without using AI machine learning, without using data centers. So they are part of the challenge. They're also an important part of the solution because software will have to run the grid that links up all these that requires these technologies to develop.
So Keshav, now, one is obviously the front end or the visible changes that happen. The second is the whole supply chain that exists, beyond that digital screen that normally people interact with, be it the chips, be it the energy requirements, be it this whole, large, I would say, assembly of supercomputers, then the cloud computing and things like that. So from your point of view, where is India in this whole scheme of things? Because there are countries who are already making a serious progress when it comes to data centers, data collection, AI. Where are we?
So look, I think from an India point of view, I think we are making great progress. I think there's a realization that lots has to be done in certain areas. And I'm pretty certain that particularly in the area of data centers, we are definitely catching up. But if you look at the overall impact, I think there's a realization in India as well as outside of India that first and foremost, that environmental sustainability should foster, social responsibility and have a positive impact on the health of the environment. I think that is the most important thinking behind some of the changes that is taking place around, the whole global data center infrastructure kind of efficiency and requirements. And generally, if you look at it, overall, I will say it tells a very positive story in terms of how things are shaping up on the global data center front. First and foremost, there is a 500 to 700% growth of data center capacity, but only a minor increase in terms of energy consumption. And that is a trend that we are seeing in India as well, right? That's the first. The second is the number of data centers and the overall compute capability or capacity has now boomed, while overall CO2 emissions or output has increased at a considerably lower pace. It is like India's IT or BPM industry. Revenue is growing much faster than headcount, right? Because of the change in models. And the third thing I would say is automation, predictive modeling, and other machine learning kind of tools are also being integrated into data center management systems to provide insight into optimal stability. So if you ask me, the overall rise in cloud computing has now enabled large-scale efficiency improvements, and this is now causing a huge improvement in what is called as power usage efficiency, or PUE. And therefore, if you look at it, even some of the large builders in India have gravitated away from traditional real estate business also into data center business, because they see it as an attractive area. They see it as an area where it will help fuel the growth of the economy. They're reaching out to many corporates to become their clients. But the new trends that we are also seeing in data centers in India also is that the best data center buildings are really built like, Lego bricks. If one system goes down, it can be unplugged and a new one can be plugged in with little or no impact on operations. That's the first. Second thing is the physical infrastructure is now being given the flexibility to dial up or down, which is on the heat side, on the heat recovery or removal side, and ensuring the right power delivery.
Ramesh, I would like to bring you in because you are actually a very critical component. Your group actually is obviously one of the largest players globally when it comes to green energy. And also in India, the kind of data centers that you all are developing. Now what is your outlook from India perspective? Because there are one or two major shifts which are taking place. One is, the world is very conscious about this China plus one strategy, and they are actively pursuing that. And then we have this whole recent events, like let's say the supply shortage of semiconductor and the way it has impacted various industries globally. When you keep all this in mind, where do we stand in terms of the green energy security and the future of data centers in India?
So just a couple of things. One, just to add on to what Keshav's saying, I think the data center sector has improved, but it has a very, very long way to go. If you look at the PUE numbers in India versus the rest of the world, there is still a significant gap that we have to work with. Part of it's driven by the weather conditions in India, the temperatures, etc. There is movement. There's a long way to go. And I think we just have to be really cautious of not taking our foot off the pedal in reducing, improving the PUEs and in the data centers across the country. That's one. Two, to the question you asked about supply chains, right? Even if you take the regulations aside, and that's clearly a very important element, the other element is just purely from a supply chain perspective. India is a very big creator of content that is used on the internet. Like 85% of the content on the internet is video content, right? So if you take that into account, and the amount of content that is created on YouTube and TikTok, etc., out of India is significant. At the same time, we are also big consumers of data. And so when you take supply and demand existing in the same place, it makes sense to have the infrastructure locally as well, even if you take all regulatory elements aside. India currently has a tremendous opportunity for growth in this sector because the capacity in India is nowhere compared to the demand and supply. So that's the second. And what was the third part of your question, Mihir?
So one was obviously data center, one was green energy, and then when all of this comes together, keeping in mind the China plus one strategy that world is trying to adopt, where India stands to benefit.
Yeah. So the clearly the electronic value chain that is driving a lot of this, there is a big opportunity. Again, you look at where the supply chain is. If the demand is in India, there is a huge opportunity to shift a lot of the supply into the country as well, to reduce the supply chains, to reduce cross-national flows, to reduce the lead times in any supply chain. And that's becoming more and more obvious as we go through the disruptions that COVID created. The other element in all this, just touching on data centers for one quick moment, is the reliability level of data centers is so high that is required, and renewable energy is not yet very reliable. So being able to solve that supply demand match at a minute by minute level rather than an aggregate level is where the challenge is and the opportunity really is. For us, irrespective, there is an opportunity as supply chains globally have been disrupted, with India also being a huge demand point for a lot of the not just the assembly, but working all the way back in the electronic supply chain for the entire supply chain or where the value is added in the supply chain to shift to India. And companies around the world, not just in electronics, right, go for reliability as an element of supply chains, not just cost. And lead time being important, not just cost. So it's ours to lose this moment in time.
Right. Now, obviously, we are running slightly short of time, but Ramesh, what I want to cover is, since it sounds very exciting, but obviously there are things that we need to do as a country, there are things we need to do as a society, there are things we need to do as an individual to see to it that the best possible benefit of technology is derived for the country, for the society, and for individuals also. So which are those three things that India as a nation must focus on to remain ahead in this technological transformation and see to it that it helps take as many people out of poverty or out of any sort of deprivation that they are in going forward? Three things that India needs to do.
To me, there are three elements, like you said, right? One is, how do we build our digital infrastructure to the extent that it allows us, a lot like what Korea has done in the previous generation. We have to be leading on the digital infrastructure front, whether it's data centers, fiber, 5G, etc., to provide the ability for that next generation of innovation to happen across the country. The second is we have to prioritize the goals for the country, which I see the Indian government's done a really good job on. What should we be doing, right? Education, health before gaming, for example. And make sure that priority is clear. The third is shift towards developing IP as opposed to figuring out what technology works somewhere else or what use case works somewhere else and port them to India. If we can hit on all of this, we have an opportunity not just to transform India, which we need to do, but also make this next generation of technologies our ability to provide an entirely new set of products and solutions and services to the rest of the world and set us up to be global leaders for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Right. Keshav, my last question to you. You have been, in fact, playing a very pivotal role in your capacity, even as an NASSCOM head when you were heading it, and even now. What happens to the skilling part of it? Because, all of this requires a different set of skills. And maybe now is the time, since we are in the process of implementing new education policy, now is the time to actually inculcate, some sort of skill building model in our education system, which can sustain us and prepare us for the future. Your take on that?
Yeah, Mihir, actually, great question. And I agree completely with what Ramesh said, because I think, some of the things he spoke about are game changing and must be created. So without repeating any of those things, I will say once all of that is ready, and in fact, even before that is ready to create it, I think the most important thing is we have to build a very agile mindset and transformational agenda in the minds of people for service delivery, and to encourage them to go after very transformed business models. So that is the first thing I would say. The second thing is, along with this change that we are looking forward to having, we must also ensure that technology transformation goes hand in hand with talent and culture transformation. I think that's the second thing that we must do. And the third thing is, both at a country level and individual business and company level, there has to be this huge focus on technical skills, upskilling, reskilling, cross-skill, talent building, capability, and things like that. And in that context, I must say that India's IT business, where the Indian government and bodies like NASSCOM work very closely hand in hand over the years to actually create what we call prime future skills model, that actually has chosen certain specific areas that need to be invested in from a skills point of view very, very deeply. And that model and that platform is now being used to reskill, upskill, and retrain the existing 4 million people that are already engaged in this business. And as we get more and more of those programs running, the ability for us to take leadership position globally by having ready people who are first upskilled from the jobs that they're already doing, and new people coming into the industry who are being trained in the new technologies and new ways of work is very high.
All right, Keshav, thank you so much for joining us. Ramesh, thank you so much for joining us. And this was indeed a sort of an eye-opener kind of a discussion. Obviously, I mean, there are subjects and there are topics within this dialogue which needs further detailing, but we'll keep that for some other time. Thank you so much for joining us.